When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and it's time to get wealthy. You're going to learn exactly what you need to know and do to finally achieve the level of success that you desire and you deserve. A new report out by McKinsey & Company and leanin.org indicates that the job experiences for women of color in the workplace are not improving. And we're not surprised by that. Certainly I'm not. But furthermore, the report shows that microaggressions in the workplace are really undermining the success of Black women. So here's what they don't want you to know about what it really means to succeed in the workplace for Black women. First, you have to be the author of your own story and control your own narrative. Secondly, you have to begin to understand the power dynamics in these organizations. And finally, you need to know that social capital is the most valuable currency of all. And here to shed light on exactly what you need to know and do is Francine Parham. She is the founder of Francine Parham and Company, and she's no stranger to corporate America. In fact, she has been able to climb the ranks into senior management of two global organizations. That's Fortune 500 companies like J&J and General Electric. She's also the author of the new book, Please Sit Over There. Learning what you need to know about managing power, overcoming exclusion, and succeeding in the workplace as a woman. And I'm excited to welcome to Get Wealthy, Francine Parham. Welcome to Get Wealthy.
Hi there, Deborah. How are you? So happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here because I want to start with the title almost validating what that study showed. That was a microaggression, if you will. So let's just start by, how did you come up with the title for your book?
Oh, wow, Deborah. So, I'm a storyteller and I love to chat and talk. And I happened to be sharing with my publisher at the time a story that I had, an experience, more importantly, that I had, in which I was, it was the first day of my new job that I had with one of my former employers. And I was, all set. I was ready to go. I was excited to be there. And I showed up early and walked in the front door and said, "Hi, I'm Francine Parham." And before I could say anything else, the receptionist that was there, she said to me, without even establishing eye contact, she said, "You must be with the individuals that are coming to start here in the administrative pool." She said, "Why don't you she said, "Do me a favor and just sit over there." And she pointed, she's like, just sit over there. And I was like, did I just hear what I thought I heard? So that was the story. That's the story of the book, in which, I was basically dismissed and told where I needed to go, what I needed to do. And most importantly, I was, assumed to be something that I was not. And so I talk about that in the book, and, how I, responded to that, and how I, replied, and all the good stuff that came along with it. But yeah, I was told to please sit over there.
But what you have not shared is the fact that you were not an associate, that you were the new global vice president reporting right into the CEO. And the reason I say that is, and we're certainly going to get more into that in the book, is that the tendency for many of us who would have had that happen would have been it would have thrown us off our game, right? Like, here it was, your first day. Mm-hmm. And so I really want to get into the conversation about the importance of I call it keeping your wits about you.
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
And
Yeah.
so to that point, I just want you to, for our audience, just expand on not where you, what the dismissal was and how you were able to recover from that.
Yeah, I mean, at that time, and this came from, as you and I know, Deborah, it comes from years of training. And I don't say training in a positive manner, but in terms of being able to understand how you should respond in certain circumstances. And I was always a key listener. So I always listened to individuals. I always observed what individuals were doing. And I grew up being taught that very early on in my life, in my formative years of my growing up, in which my parents always said to me, pay attention, Francine, make sure you're listening, make sure, you are aware of what's going on before you respond. And so I carried that with me into the corporate world. I was always observing and always listening and being very mindful about how I should respond. And, that incident was a true testimony of what I had, done for years and years, and really came to the point where, I often talk to individuals about ensuring that they have a clutch between their brain and their mouth. And what I wanted to say did not come through. Like the clutch kind of stopped me. But at the end of the day, I said to myself very quickly, you've been in situations where you've been dismissed. You've been in situations where people have acknowledged you only as the help in the meeting, or they think that you are not who you are. And so you have the opportunity to respond to this. And you have an opportunity also to put this person in the place that they belong in a very purposeful and a very, respectful manner. So first of all, I never lose respect for anyone. I never let anyone, push me to the point where I'm disrespectful of them, because I don't think that that's necessary. But, I knew what she was doing. So as soon as she said to me, please sit over there, I paused for a moment. All of that experience, all of that practice that I had, for I want to say almost a decade and a half at that time, because this was the biggest global job that I had ever had in my career. And so all of that came to fruition. And I said, so what do I do about this? How do I respond to this? And I said to the woman in a very nice way, I said, excuse me, you may not know, but I'm the new Senior Vice President. I'm the new executive here today. And I just needed you to do me a quick favor. Could you just point me in the direction? And I kind of, did the little signal with my hands. And I said, could you point me in the direction of the president's office? Because I report into him. I'm Francine Parham, your new Global Vice President of Human Resources. As soon as I said that, because I had been practicing, and I thought to myself, Deborah, I said, who did not get the memo? Like my announcement went to places that I didn't even know existed within my organization. And I got welcomes and thank you and congratulations. And we look forward to all of that. So I'm like, how was she left off like of the CC list? What happened here? And at the end of the day, when I did that, she looked up and she was like, oh my goodness, like the energy just drained out of her face. And she's like, oh, can I help you? Oh, you're Francine. And I'm like, no. I said, just please do me a favor. Could you please point me to the direction of our president? And I thank you so much for doing that. Don't get up. Don't worry. I paused enough to let it settle. I wanted her to know that who she's misunderstood, she misunderstood.
And the reason I wanted you to double click off of that, the significance of the title of your book, is because it will allow us to provide through our framework on Get Wealthy. One of the things we use as a framework around success, whether it's financial success, career success, is mindset, strategy, and execution. And so the first thing I want to touch on is mindset, because I feel like that really illustrated what having your wits about you and the mindset that you have to have when you're in these organizations, so that you are putting yourself in the best position to succeed And I say that, Francine, because as someone who didn't come from wealth, who was the first in my family to reach the management and senior management ranks in an organization, I didn't have a playbook. I didn't know what to say or what not to say. I mean, thank goodness I had mentors and sponsors within those organizations who would pull me aside and say, well, Deborah, you know what? I was in the meeting, you did this. Next time, try doing this. And so what I really look at your book as is like the code book, right? Yes. Like corporate success decoded, all the things that you don't know that your colleagues, because they have had probably their parents were in senior management, had all been in the room, have been whispering to them about how to conduct yourself and succeed. But we didn't have that model because our parents, we're kind of traveling the road untraveled, if you will. The first question I want to ask you is, what is the mindset that Black women need to have in order to excel up through the management ranks in corporate America?
Sure. I think, Deborah, that we have to have the mindset of, understanding that we will face adversity and we will face individuals who have never had any exposure to us, even in today's world. Even in you would say, how do you not have exposure to a woman of color, to a Black woman in today's world? But I say that when I speak of exposure, I also speak of context, in terms of individuals having had experiences with you, having and knowing about you outside of the workplace, or individuals that are like you in other settings, so you have to be okay with that. You have to know about the environment that you are going into. And you have to understand that, you are dealing with people who live sometimes a very insular life. Their exposure to you or someone like you may only be at work. It may only be in a professional setting, and it may only be in a specific meeting, that they have. And so you have to be, you have to be okay with that. Your role and your mission is not to teach them, so I'm very conscious of individuals that always say, well, teach me what it's like, Francine, or tell me what it's like, Francine. I'm like, what you should do is observe, like I've been observing for years. You should go read a couple books. Maybe you want to have a couple conversations with us and things like that. But you have to be of the mindset that you are walking into sometimes unfamiliar territory, and you have to be okay with that. And you have to show up as your best self, and you have to not be frazzled by that. If I had thought about that, I would have not built my career. I've been to and lived in places that have been extremely remote. I've been to places where people did not even speak English, in which I've lived, and things of that nature. And I looked at it as an opportunity, an opportunity for me to, show up in a very different way, and sometimes demystify the stereotypes that they had about, Black African-American women, such as myself. And, I tell people that, know that this is true. I give the story, and I share this in my book as well, is that, there are two women that are standing across the street, and there's a group that's waiting to receive them. And the first person that's crossing the street is a Caucasian woman. And I say that she gets to come across the street, and she gets to meet the new people, and they're very excited about her, and they want her to tell her story. And say who she is, what she does, all of those good things. Then the other woman, who happens to be a Black woman, crosses the street, and she starts walking. She gets there, she meets the individuals and that she's supposed to meet, that the Caucasian woman also met. And she has to spend time unraveling her story. Why? Because the story has already been created about her as she has been crossing the street. And I say that because a lot of times when you go into situations, especially in the workplace, understand that there's a story that is in someone's mind already about you. And that is often based on their experiences. Maybe it's based on who you are, not who you are personally, but what you represent. And at the end of the day, you have to be aware of that, and you have to be on your toes and be okay with responding to that. And it doesn't mean that they're wrong. It doesn't mean that you're right. It just means that there is an opportunity there. So I always look at that. I always looked at going into places that other people who didn't look like me were in. Imagine that day back in the company in which the woman told me to please sit over there. I walked into a room of 13 other executives, and there was no other female in that room. There was no other Black female in that room. All of the leaders that were sitting at that table were white males. And so I had to be mindful.
And I think the most important thing that I want our audience to take out of this mindset segment really is the importance of controlling the narrative and your story. That's something that you spend a great deal of writing about in your book, is that, and I love that you were able to use that example of two women walking across the street. One person gets to tell her story. One has to dismantle a story based on preconceptions. And so when we come back, I want to go to the next aspect of our framework, and that is our strategy so mindset, strategy, execution. Next, I want to come back to why having a strategy is so important, and also ask you about the strategy that you had as you started your career. So don't go anywhere, folks. When we come back, our next segment for today, and helping women, and Black women, specifically women of color, excel in the workplace, is around the strategies that you can use to do so successfully.
Let's be honest, as successful women, we're crushing it. Maxed out 401k and Roth IRA? Check. Aggressive savings and investments? Check. Yet, the freedom our success was supposed to buy can leave us stuck on the six-figure hamster wheel, watching retirement slip further down the road. There's another way. Get coaching courses and community at wealthyu.com.
We've got to stand up. Republicans are banning abortion rights, tearing down democracy, blocking progress. But when Democrats stand together, we win. Because we voted, Democrats stood up for Black lives, voting to ban police chokeholds, stood up for Black women, putting one on the Supreme Court, stood up for our families, lowering cost of health care and prescriptions and capping insulin, and stood up for millions by slashing student debt. This November, let's stand up together and keep making progress.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
This is our time, our moment to move forward, beyond the gun violence, the hospital closures, the unaffordable housing. Brian Kemp's Georgia for the wealthiest few. Stacey Abrams is looking out for every Georgian. She'll invest our $6 billion surplus in the fundamentals, education, healthcare, housing, and a good living. Putting more money in your pocket to build one Georgia where everyone has the freedom to thrive.
I'm Deborah Owens, and this is Get Wealthy, and we're talking about women of color navigating what can be a hostile environment in corporate America. My guest today is Francine Parham. She is the author of her most recent book, which is You Sit Over There. I think I got the title right, but I felt like, man, that was really a microaggression, but it's not that we haven't all experienced that. And to that end, I feel like sometimes those microaggressions are really designed to kind of throw us off our game. Sure. And if we're not careful, then we actually diminish our own success in organizations based on how we respond. And so the first question that I have for you in that regard is just around strategy. You just mentioned that someone asked you what they should do in order to succeed, and you talked about observing. But where did you learn that yourself?
Well, I learned that I started, as I said, I learned very early on in my life that it was very important that I observed. I mean, I grew up in a household. There were six children and two parents. And, I grew up in a household where I had two parents who were very active in the civil rights movement. They were very active in conversations around, the advancement of, just Black people holistically from an economic perspective, from, they were educators, they were teachers. And so I learned a lot by listening to them. So I joke and I say I was in training for, corporate America before I even entered corporate America. But once I got there, the one thing was that it was foreign territory to me because, as we talked about earlier, Deborah, I did not have any map. I didn't have anyone that was really, pulling me aside and saying, hey, Francine, look to the left, look to the right. Let me introduce you to this group or this, person or whatever the case may be. And so what I started to do was I started to look and listen to individuals who I aspire to be. And I said, you know what? I think, I understand this whole concept of managing people, leading people, and that's what I want to do. And, I thought to myself, so how do I best do this? I don't have a roadmap. No one's pulling me aside. No one's saying really anything to me. They're just kind of expecting me to do my job. And I started to look at people who were successful. And I looked at how individuals were given certain assignments. I looked at how they were, moved forward in the organization. And what I also found out and noticed were that these were people who didn't necessarily, get the job because they deserved it. They didn't necessarily get the job because they were the next in line or it made sense in the organizational chart. I started to see that, all things were not equal. And I started to wonder and ask, so I tell everyone one of the strategies that I had when I was in corporate America and even to the last days of my career when I was an executive is I made a point to sit down and I made a point to talk to people. And I made a point to be very purposeful and thought-provoking when I spoke to them. And I ensured that I wanted to leave them with a particular message about me. And, I would knock on the doors of very senior people who were, more senior than I would have ever been at the time in my career. And even, as I also became an executive, and I would say, I want to sit down and talk to you about a few things. I want to understand, here's what I know about you. So I'm not talking about, I know about your job. I know about your career. I've heard, everything about your career path, but I really want to know. So how did you get there? So how did you?
So I want to stop there, Francine, because this is so critical. And it's one of the points that you make in the book, and it's about relationships and social capital being a high currency. Mm-hmm. And I often feel like if people feel like they got to stand in their line of command, right? Like I don't, I report to this person. I either need to have them introduce me and I'm going off the, off of the pattern. If I were to go around and meet these other people, how important was that? Do you believe the importance of using that strategy influenced your ability to make it to in a global senior management position?
Oh, it was paramount for me. It was critical for me because it was the beginning of what I talk about around building those deep relationships, right? So really having those conversations. And I wasn't focused, as I said, I wasn't focused on, tell me about your career path. I wanted to really understand how did they get to where they were? And I said, so you know what, if you're thinking about me, so you know a little bit about me, I've talked to you about that. You know, I'm sure you've read something about me. And so I really want to know how or what are things that I should be thinking of, you know, and as I became more senior in the roles that I had, Deborah, I started to ask, so what do you know about me? What do you think the organization says about me? You know, what do you think about me? Right. So as I started to get more, you know, familiar, as I started to become more, you know, as I said, more senior, I was able to ask much more important questions. And I'm not saying you got to wait until you get to that place in space, but it was a skill that I developed over time. That building of deep relationships in the organization is paramount, that you bringing something to those individuals. So once you develop those relationships, I discovered that I had a unique knack for being able to assess people. And so, you know, leaders started to come to me and they started to say, hey, Francine, well, what do you think? And my assessments usually were spot on. And I was like, wow, you know what? They're not asking me or talking to me about like my performance. They're talking to me about something else, something that they value, my social capital. And so what I did was I maximized that. So when I talked to people, when I said things, when I, you know, had those lunches or those meetings with individuals, I made sure that they knew that I had that skill. And that skill had nothing to do necessarily about my performance, because see, what I tell people is your performance, right? That is the table stakes. Everything that I'm talking about, things such as having organizational advocacy, being strategic about your career, having your own narrative, right? Get ahead of the narrative. Don't let the narrative be created for you. So when I
want to stop you there, Francine, because it's very important as his audiences understand. It's not just going in the room and asking people sort of like, if you were me, what would you do? I believe the point that you're making is what's also critical in those interactions is that you bring something of value as well, that you've done your homework and that you're not just having conversations, that you are bringing insight to that individual in the organization that conveys that you understand, that you are aligned with the organization's objectives, and that there is some unique value that you can add. And to that degree, with this unique value, then, you know, what do you perceive of me, and how do you think I could make more of an impact? So it's not really what I can get, it's more of how I can impact. I believe that is what you have just characterized.
Oh, absolutely, Deborah. You hit the nail on the head. Absolutely. It is what you bring to the table, right? Because at the end of the day, I understood the power dynamics. And, you know, when I talk about, you know, my book and I say, you know, how to manage power. Power in its simplest form is your ability to influence. And so I discovered that I had an ability to influence in a certain way and in a meaningful way. And sometimes you'll have to do some homework on it. I say to people that, you know, it's not what may naturally come to you. You may have to do some homework. You may have to ask a few people, you know, ask your trusted advisors, you know what the hallway conversation is about you and what does the organization value. And if they only say to you, well, you know, the last project you did, you know, you did exceptionally well, and they know that you are, you know, that you make things happen, Francine. You know, think about, are they describing you as maybe a hard worker versus a strategic thinker, right? Think about what is being said about you and think about how you can position yourself, as I said, once again, to really get ahead of the narrative and to create the narrative that you want to create. That is the power. That is the power. That is your ability to influence those by which you want to know who you are, who can speak on your behalf when you are not in the room. can help you with things such as the place where you talk to women about from a compensation perspective. I became, it was very clear to me as I continue to rise in the organization that, the advancement was definitely tied, this whole advancement was tied to, my pay. It was tied to me helping my family. It was tied to me living the life that I wanted to. So I always talk about the economics behind one's advancement as well. That is super,
I
super
love
important.
that.
This is
so don't get it twisted, right? Like
no.
you need to have an objective. When we come back, Francine, I want to go right into how you execute on so many of the golden nuggets and the gems that you talk about in your book. So don't go anywhere, folks. When we come back, we're going to go to our next part of our success framework, and that is execution. Don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
We've got to stand up. Republicans are banning abortion rights, tearing down democracy, blocking progress. But when Democrats stand together, we win. Because we voted, Democrats stood up for Black lives, voting to ban police chokeholds, stood up for Black women, putting one on the Supreme Court, stood up for our families, lowering cost of health care and prescriptions and capping insulin, and stood up for millions by slashing student debt. This November, let's stand up together and keep making progress.
This is our time, our moment to move forward, beyond the gun violence, the hospital closures, the unaffordable housing. Brian Kemp's Georgia for the wealthiest few. Stacey Abrams is looking out for every Georgian. She'll invest our $6 billion surplus in the fundamentals, education, healthcare, housing, and a good living, putting more money in your pocket to build one Georgia where everyone has the freedom to thrive.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I hope you're enjoying my conversation today with Francine Parham, who is the author of Please Sit Over There, How to Manage Power, Overcome Exclusion, and Succeed as a Black Woman in the Workplace. Now, this is exactly where I want to go with you, Francine, around execution. And it is that power dynamic. And one of the points that you make in your book is that women can often feel like, well, not just women, people can often feel like power is has a negative connotation to it. And so I'd love if you could give our audience some perspective around power dynamics and the value that they have in your ability to be successful.
Well, Deborah, you're right. Absolutely. When you hear the word power, people are like, wow, that's bad, and at the end of the day, I submit to you, it's not. Once again, power is about an individual's ability to influence. So you can have organizational power, you can have positional power. There are all different types of power. And on the spectrum, there's good power and there's bad power. People use power to control other individuals, to do all sorts of things. And it happens in the workplace as well. So nothing unique about that. But at the end of the day, I talk about the power of, you thinking through how you want to succeed in the workplace and mobilizing individuals, sharing your voice. That is power within itself. Being intentional about that. It's not, running around in the organization and saying, hey, I didn't say to individuals, everyone that I met, you know what, my goal is to be a leader in this organization. I was very strategic and I was very thoughtful and mindful, no matter what organization that I was in, that I shared it with the right people, right? That is the part, because you are often not in the room, right? You are not in the room when people are speaking about you. And it's very important that you understand, how things work within your organization. That's power within itself, understanding, your culture, understanding how people navigate. Those are things that you really need to spend time on before you make the declarative statements about what you want or who you want to be within your organization. Having that thought, understanding how things work in your organization, how are people selected, right? And how you plan to show up to be able to share with those that are individuals that are in those rooms that are making those decisions about you. You want them to know about you. And I'm speaking of whether it's sponsoring you, whether it's mentoring you.
And so one of the questions that I had for you was that being strategic and getting people to know you, the question I had particularly for people who are either early on in their career or mid-career and they're stuck, what are the activities that I need to pursue to allow me to gain the exposure with, as you so well put it, the right people? What are some specific activities I can pursue to make sure that I'm exposing myself?
Sure. Well, I mentioned, you can decide you want to have a conversation, a prepared conversation with those people that you understand in your organization have that type of positional power. I mean, I always said, if I get a no, it just means just not now. I'm going to come back. I'm going to keep coming back. So you have to be persistent and having that dialogue and having those conversations. I tell people, especially Black women, we are known to, deliver. We make things happen, but be thoughtful around what you want to deliver on. And if there are projects in your organization that you know about, think about raising your hand, but raising your hand in an intentional manner with the right people. And think about if that project is going to give you the right exposure. Is it going to position you? Every project that the organization comes to you with that may be, this 5-year out type project is not the right project for you. If it takes you 5 years to get acknowledged, then, 9 times out of 10, the people and the players have been lost or have moved on, not lost, but have been moved on. So I tell people, to pay attention to what is happening in your organization. Also pay attention to those that are getting opportunities that you think that you should be able to get as well. And what projects and things are they working on? What initiatives are they working on? Look around. And I always, no matter what job that I took, when I sat down and someone said to me, "Hey, Francine, we think that this is a great job," my first question after I said, "Thank you for thinking of me," was, what is this job preparing me for? What will this job prepare me for?
No, what I love about your book is how much strategic information, strategic insight, that's the way I want to frame it, that you're giving. Because one of the other stories that you tell in the book is about someone who you felt like could be a leader, but the rest of the people around you, your colleagues, did not think so because of the way they were conducting themselves. And I believe that as I went up through the ranks, I was very loyal to the person that I reported to, and was often, if I were in a room, conveying what their objectives were instead of my own. Share with us a little bit about how you can navigate that, kind of political arena where you're not only loyal to your boss, but that you are positioning yourself so that you're thought of as someone who can go up in the ranks.
Yeah, it's a great thing to be able to leverage your leader. So just as I call it leveraging your leader, just as much as your leader is asking you, or your manager, your supervisor, whomever is asking you to achieve things, you can leverage them as well. I always had professional development conversations. So, sometimes you will have, individuals or your manager that will want to have a performance discussion with you. And I say, you know what? have that performance discussion with them, but say, hey, you know what, Scott, I'm coming back to you and we're going to have a professional development conversation. And in that professional conversation that we're going to have about my development, I want to talk to you about who should I get to know here in the organization. See, I just got a list from him, hopefully, when I have that conversation that gives me permission to do that, right? So it gives me the opportunity to leverage. This is really about, you're right, Deborah. My book that I wrote was really about being strategic about your career and being intentional about your career. Once I figured out that I needed to do that as a Black woman, see, I discovered early on, thank goodness, that I wasn't going to get the come on over here, Francine. I want to show you, Francine. I didn't get any of that. So I had to think through ways to kind of, as I say, backdoor it in and, really doing things such as leveraging my manager. So when I went to knock on that senior leader's door, I said, you know what, Scott told me, we had a conversation about my development and here's what we talked about. And he told me, oh, by the way, I should talk to you. Now I'm talking to his administrative assistant before I get to him. And I say to her, you know what? I was talking to my boss, Scott, and Scott told me that I needed to get on Andrew's calendar. And he said that I needed to have a developmental discussion with him. Would you be so kind to please schedule Scott, to schedule us together? Because Scott said it was, okay to do that. You see what I did?
I'm so glad. Yeah, but Francine, I'm so glad you said that because so someone could have taken at face value that, oh, well, just go around and introduce yourself to people. But no, it is always who introduces you into the room where you leverage their influence. And that's the point that you make in the book that I think is so critical, is that power is influence.
Correct.
But the other point that you made, and I can remember, I didn't play sports, right? Mm-hmm. And so you're in the financial services industry and every promotion we had was about the Final Four, this and that, right? Mm-hmm. And so to that end, I kind of felt like an outsider, but what I began to understand, and this is critical and something you put in the book, is that this is a game and you are playing to win. And ultimately, you have to have a goal. Understand that you are in a game and that you need to know the rules. And so I would submit to you that that's the book. What the book is really about is about giving you the rules of succeeding that you would not have received in your formal education.
Absolutely. The things that I speak about, Deborah, I didn't get any training on that. First of all, it was in no book. When I talk about these implicit skills and these unwritten rules and unspoken rules and things of that nature in my book, these are things that I garnered and learned as I, progressed in the organization. And then when I got to the table, right, when I was able to make decisions, because I was an executive, I was a leader, I started to look around and I started to think about this and I started to understand, and share as well with those that I thought needed to know that there was, there are these unwritten rules and unspoken skills. And the simple question I always said is, how do you play a game in which there are no rules? Because there are no rules, PS, right? How do you play a game that has no rules? You watch the players. Right? Because the players they're establishing the rules and the rules change all the time. And it is a game and you have to be okay with that. And it's not that you like it, but you have to ask yourself, what is your overall intention? What are you playing ultimately for? Are you playing for being able to retire when you turn 50 or 45 or 50? Are you playing for your family? What are you playing for here?
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that, because I think oftentimes we have been given a rule book or a playbook that is obsolete. Yeah. As the work environment has gotten more complex. What that means is that you have to have a more complex strategy to achieve your goals. When we come back, I know we've covered a lot of ground and we're going right into our Analyze, Optimize, and Maximize segment, where we're going to have a rapid fire. What are the things that were really, really important for you to know? So don't go anywhere, folks. We'll be right back.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
We've got to stand up. Republicans are banning abortion rights, tearing down democracy, blocking progress. But when Democrats stand together, we win. Because we voted, Democrats stood up for Black lives, voting to ban police chokeholds, stood up for Black women, putting one on the Supreme Court, stood up for our families, lowering cost of health care and prescriptions and capping insulin, and stood up for millions by slashing student debt. This November, let's stand up together and keep making progress.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, and this is Get Wealthy, and we've been having a fabulous conversation with Francine Parham about what it takes for women of color, Black women specifically, to succeed in corporate America. Francine, wow, you gave us a lot of insight, but I would say what I know about your book is that we've barely touched the surface. And so what I would love for you to do now in our Analyze, Optimize, Maximize segment, think of it as rapid fire, right? Like, what are the three, first of all, what's the first thing we need to analyze about ourselves if we're going to succeed in corporate America?
Understand that the rules are not defined, and understand that you within your organization have to discover what they are. And most importantly, once you discover what they are, decide how you're going to use them for your success.
I love that, because it really takes me to the next aspect, and that is of optimizing your skills, your abilities. But one of the things you talk about in the book is that it's not necessarily your knowledge, skills, and ability that is going to have you that will make the greatest impact on your success. How can you optimize your career so that you're not like getting stuck, that you do have some momentum and trajectory?
I would say, first of all, understand that your performance, any organization views your performance as a given, right? So don't by the very nature that you are a great performer, an outstanding performer, that gives you your ticket to be able to go on to other things. So first of all, make sure you got your performance right, and then start to think about what you need to be. What does your organization value, right? What do they value for others? And what have you seen others in terms of moving forward, being promoted? What have you seen? And does it align to what you want? That's very important as well. Don't stay in an organization where your values, what you do, what they ask you to do doesn't align. But at the end of the day, get people beyond talking about you just being a great performer. Make sure they're talking about the other things that you bring to the table. Do you have leadership? Do you bring the presence that they want you to have in the workplace? I mean, and there are often things, Deborah, that, we look at and we're like, no, oh my God. So they want to know about what my story is. Yeah, they do. They want to be able to see if I have leadership presence. Yes, they do. All of those things. They want to know, does someone sponsor me in the organization or support me? Yeah, those leaders who are making decisions about you, they do want to know that, because that's how they make their decisions. They look at your performance as a given.
And so, and the point really, I guess, that you're making is that to analyze, optimize, and maximize your ability to achieve your objectives. And that really is about competence. At the end of the day, yes, you're there for a reason. And so much of the effort that we have is to be rewarded. Fabulous conversation, Francine. If you could just leave our audience with one nugget that you feel can make a great impact that is also included in your book?
Wow, Deborah. I would say the one thing I would say to, those of you that are listening or are a part of this conversation is, never give up the voice that you have. And make sure that those in your organization know about your voice and they know about what you want and what you expect. When we allow other individuals to craft that for us, so as I said earlier, getting ahead of that narrative, then you have lost if you let that be created for you. Create it, stand on it, develop it, make it yours, and be proud of it, first of all, but more importantly, make sure that that is what you want with your career and with your success. That is so important that you have the right voice, the right tone, all of the things that I talk about to strategically position yourself for what you want with your career and ultimately what you want from a goal perspective.
I think the point that you're really making, and it's so important, we go in these organizations so often, Francine, thinking that we're going to put our head down, we're going to perform highly, and as a result of that, somebody's going to tap us on the shoulder and they're going to promote us into the next role. I believe that the point that you're making in this conversation that we're having today, as well as in your book, is no. That we are the captain of the ship, that we are if we were to put it in sports terms, the quarterback. And it really is for us to have a strategy, right, about having a career touchdown, getting the compensation that we deserve. That really is, we can't delegate that to anyone, that we have to make sure that we're playing the game and we're playing to win.
Absolutely, Deborah. If you are not in it, then you got to get out of it. You really have to, because I often say, why do you wait to be unhappy? If you're not happy with navigating, if you're not happy with, the way that the organization is set up, those players that are in the organization, all of those good things, if they are not what you want, don't wait, because see, it doesn't get any better. I talk to a lot of women that are, in that mid-career part of their professional journey. And they're like, I don't know what happened, Francine. It was happening all along. You just weren't paying attention because you had your head down. And I say to all women, please don't put your head down. You are, as a Black woman, you're going to do an amazing job anyway. So keep your head up. I just know that. I know that because I'm one, so I know.
Yeah, I gotcha. So, and finally, Francine, I know you do a lot of work assisting women of color in the workplace and advancing their career. Please let our audience know how they can learn not only more about your book, but also about the work that you're doing.
Oh, wow. A couple things. I have a program called Sharpen Your Skills Professional, in which I knock on the doors of organizations and I say, you want to have this for your women. It talks, about those implicit skills that I mentioned earlier, and helping women to prepare for those. I also come out to organizations and I speak. I speak not only to the women of the organization, the women of color, the Black women, but I speak to their leaders, because see, I believe that the work that I'm talking about is a leadership imperative. It's not just a grassroots activity. So I do not hang this all on our shoulders to have accomplished. It is not for us to bear alone. So between my speaking, between my, professional development workshops, and just getting out here and talking to amazing people such as you, Deborah, that's where you can reach out to me, and always shoot me an email at francineparham.com, or connect with me in LinkedIn. There is not a person that I do not pay attention to or respond to if they send me a note in LinkedIn. So I'm very purposeful.
That's great. That's great. So I hope you've enjoyed our conversation on what you need to do to, if you're ever responded to, go sit over there. Yes. But when we come back, I'm going to leave you with the 3 takeaways from today's show. Don't go anywhere, because we're going to be right back.
This is our time. Our moment to move forward, beyond the gun violence, the hospital closures, the unaffordable housing. Brian Kemp's Georgia for the wealthiest few. Stacey Abrams is looking out for every Georgian. She'll invest our $6 billion surplus in the fundamentals, education, healthcare, housing, and a good living, putting more money in your pocket to build one Georgia where everyone has the freedom to thrive.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and I hope you enjoyed Get Wealthy. Today's show was really about helping you understand what you need to navigate your career so that you can earn what you deserve. So here are the 3 takeaways from today's show. The first is identify your career objective. What is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? And if you know what you're going for, it's much easier to go that, and to get there. And that's exactly what our guests shared with you today. Secondly, understand the power dynamics in an organization. It's not always title in terms of who has the most influence, but you want to be more strategic about how to understand power and how to use power. And then finally, and most importantly, it's own your story. That's going to do it for Get Wealthy today. Keep watching, folks. I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, right here, only on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at Roland S. Martin.